He woke up with lions surrounding his house with no phone. Then he did the impossible. The roar tore through the adobe walls as if they were paper. Alejandro Vega's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding against his ribs. The darkness was nearly complete in that remote research station in Kenya's Amboseli National Reserve. A second roar, closer than the first, made the window panes vibrate. This was no dream or jet lag-induced confusion. He reached for his cell phone on the nightstand, but his fingers found only wood and a half-empty glass he nearly knocked over. He remembered then that the battery had died the night before, and he had left it charging at the workstation across the cabin. "Damn it," he whispered to himself, instinctively lowering his voice, though he knew the walls wouldn't protect him if the lions decided to enter. Alejandro was a biologist from Mexico's National Autonomous University. He had been in Kenya for 3 weeks, collaborating with local researchers on a study about climate change's impact on the park's herbivore migration patterns. The station where he was staying was designed to be safe, elevated on stilts, with small barred windows and a reinforced metal door. But he had never heard lions so close before. The nearest pride usually hunted several kilometers away. He slowly got up, trying not to make noise. The wooden floor creaked under his bare feet as he cautiously approached the nearest window. He slightly parted the curtain, just enough to look outside. His blood froze in his veins. Under the silvery African moonlight, 7 adult lions surrounded the station, 3 males with impressive dark manes and 4 females, all apparently focused on something beneath the elevated structure. The largest male persistently sniffed one of the stilts, while the females patrolled the perimeter with fluid, lethal movements. Alejandro had spent enough time in the field to know this wasn't normal. Lions rarely showed interest in human structures unless there was food or a perceived threat. His scientific mind began searching for explanations while panic threatened to cloud his judgment. The answer came when one of the male lions raised its head and looked directly at the window where Alejandro was watching. The beast had something dark hanging from its mouth, something that still moved weakly, a baby wildebeest, still alive. Alejandro immediately understood what was happening. The previous night, he had heard a female wildebeest in evident distress near the station, but had assumed the animal would eventually move away. The wildebeest must have given birth under the station, seeking protection for delivery. The lions had followed the smell of blood and placenta here. He needed to think fast. The station consisted of 2 rooms, the bedroom where he was now, and the main room that functioned as kitchen, dining room, and workspace. A door separated both spaces. If the lions managed to find a way up to the elevated platform and enter, he would need to take refuge in the safest room. His phone was in the other room, so was the emergency radio. The jeep shared by the researchers was parked about 50 meters away, completely out of reach. The rest of the team had moved to a secondary camp to study a group of elephants and wouldn't return for 2 days. "Stay calm," he told himself. "You've been in worse situations." It was true. During his fieldwork in Mexico, he had encountered armed drug traffickers, survived a flash flood, and faced a storm that nearly sank the boat where he was researching. But he had never faced 7 hungry apex predators with nothing but his bare hands. A metallic noise from outside pulled him from his thoughts. He returned to the window just in time to see one of the male lions trying to climb the metal ladder leading to the door. Its claws slipped on the rungs, but the animal was persistent. After several failed attempts, the lion roared in frustration and returned to the ground. Alejandro exhaled in relief, but he knew it was only a matter of time before one of the lions found a way up. He had to reach his phone and the radio. If he could contact the main ranger camp, they could send help. He gathered his courage and slowly opened the door, separating the bedroom from the rest of the cabin. The main room was bathed in moonlight streaming through the windows. He could see his phone on the work table next to soil samples and field notebooks. The emergency radio was on the shelf next to the main door. He silently slid across the room, crouching to stay out of the windows. Field of view. When he reached the table, he grabbed his phone and checked the battery. 17%, enough for a call, but there was no signal. The station was too isolated. A blow to the main door startled him. One of the lions had managed to climb up to the platform and was now pushing against the metal door. The bolt seemed to hold, but each new assault made the hinges creak. Alejandro moved quickly to the radio. He turned it on, adjusting it to the park's emergency frequency, Amboseli South Station to Central Control. "Do you read me?" he whispered urgently. "I have an emergency situation. I'm surrounded by lions and need immediate assistance." Only static answered his call. He tried adjusting the frequency, but the result was the same. The radio needed new batteries. Panic began to settle in his chest. He was completely cut off, at the mercy of predators intensifying their efforts to enter. Another lion had managed to climb to the platform, and now both animals were scratching at the door with renewed determination. Alejandro took a deep breath, forcing himself to think scientifically. Lions are intelligent but predictable animals. They hunt mainly at dawn and dusk. They are territorial and cautious about unknown situations. They fear fire and loud noises. Fire. That could be his salvation. In the kitchen, he had a small portable gas stove. He also had emergency flares in the survival kit under the sink. If he could create enough noise and light, perhaps he could scare the lions away until dawn, when the rangers made their usual rounds. He moved quickly toward the kitchen, cursing when his knee hit a chair in the darkness. The noise made the lions on the platform redouble their efforts, the metal door beginning to give way. He found the survival kit and extracted the flares, 3 in total. He also grabbed an iron skillet and a can of insect spray. Not exactly a flamethrower, but it would have to do. The first blow to the door was so strong that the metal sheet bent inward. Alejandro watched in horror as a huge claw appeared through the opening, probing the interior. There was no time left. He lit the first flare. The room flooded with bright red light and chemical smoke. With his heart pounding in his chest, he approached the door and held the flare near the opening, aiming directly at the invading claw. The roar of pain that followed was deafening. The claw disappeared, and Alejandro heard the sound of a heavy body falling from the platform. "Get out of here!" he shouted, surprising himself with his sudden burst of courage. He began to bang the skillet against the metal wall of the cabin, creating a din that reverberated through the night. He kept the flare held high, moving it in front of the window so the lions on the ground could see it. The strategy seemed to work. The roars continued, but now they sounded more distant. Through a window, he could see several lions retreating toward nearby bushes, clearly disturbed by the noise and light, but the victory was short-lived. The flare was beginning to fade, and there was still one lion on the platform, stubbornly pounding on the dented door. When the red light finally went out, Alejandro immediately lit the second flare. He had only one left after this. He needed a more permanent plan. The flares would last minutes, but the lions could remain outside for hours if they managed to get in. His gaze fell on the cabin's ceiling. There was a hatch leading to the roof, designed for maintenance and as an emergency exit. If he could reach the roof, he would have a better position to defend himself until dawn. He dragged a table under the hatch while keeping the flare held high. The second light was beginning to weaken when he managed to climb onto the table and push the hatch upward. Fresh air flooded the cabin. With a final effort, he pushed himself through the opening and emerged onto the flat metal roof. From this elevated position, he could see the lions clearly. 5 remained at a distance, watching him with evident confusion. One was limping away, probably the one he had burned with the flare. The 7th was still on the platform, but now seemed uncertain about what to do. Alejandro lit his last flare and held it high, shouting and banging on the metal roof with the skillet. The din must have been audible for kilometers. While maintaining his position on the roof, he checked his phone again. There was still no signal, but an idea occurred to him. He activated the phone's flashlight and began making SOS signals toward the sky. It was a remote possibility, but perhaps a night plane or even a satellite might catch the pattern. Minutes turned into hours. The last flare had been consumed long ago, but Alejandro maintained his ritual of noise and light with the skillet and phone flashlight. The lions had retreated to a safe distance, but were still there, waiting patiently. The phone battery indicated 3% when the first light of dawn began to tint the horizon. With the arrival of day, the lions finally seemed to lose interest. One by one, they disappeared into the vegetation, until only the largest male remained, watching him intently from the shadow of an acacia. Even at a distance, Alejandro could feel the intensity of that gaze, a predator evaluating prey that had proven too problematic. When the sun finally rose over the savanna, the last lion turned and walked away with majestic steps. Alejandro allowed himself to collapse onto the metal roof, his body trembling from exhaustion and receding adrenaline. He remained that way for what seemed like hours until the sound of an engine alerted him. A jeep with the Park Ranger Service logo was approaching on the dirt road. Alejandro began to frantically wave his arms, shouting until his throat hurt. The vehicle stopped next to the cabin, and two Kenyan rangers descended, looking in astonishment at the Mexican on the roof and the destroyed door. "Professor Vega," one of them called. "Are you all right?" Alejandro laughed, a sound that dangerously oscillated between relief and hysteria. "Define all right," he replied as he began to carefully descend through the hatch. Back on solid ground, he explained what had happened. The rangers exchanged concerned looks. "We've never seen lions attack a station," commented the older one. "Something must have specifically attracted them here." Alejandro led them under the elevated platform, where they found the remains of placenta and dried blood. There was also something he hadn't been able to see during the night, a small dead wildebeest, probably the one he had seen in the lion's jaws. "The mother gave birth here," explained the ranger. "The lions followed the scent. It's very unusual for a wildebeest to approach human structures for giving birth." As he gathered his most important belongings, Alejandro reflected on what had happened. The drought he had been studying for weeks was altering the natural behaviors of the animals. The wildebeest had sought protection in a place it would normally avoid, triggering a chain of events that almost cost him his life. In the jeep, on the way to the main camp, Alejandro observed the golden savanna stretching under the morning sun. The same lions that had tried to devour him all night now rested under a distant tree, unperturbed and magnificent. "We'll need to reinforce all remote stations," one of the rangers was saying, "and establish a new security protocol. If climate change is altering local wildlife behavior, this could happen again." Alejandro nodded, his mind already processing the experience as the scientist he was. He took out his notebook and began taking notes while the African landscape paraded beside him. 3 months later, Alejandro's expanded report would be published in Nature and would significantly change safety protocols in research stations throughout Africa. The images he had managed to take with his phone during that endless night became powerful symbols of climate change's impact on fragile ecosystems. But for Alejandro Vega, the true value of the experience was something he could never fully express in his scientific articles. The certainty that, in the eyes of that lion who observed him at dawn, he had recognized something strangely familiar, an ancestral reminder that before being scientists, before being modern humans, we were prey. And that part of our soul will always remember that fundamental fact, no matter how many layers of civilization we accumulate over it.